Hello and welcome to the Daily Newspaper Analysis, an initiative of the UPSConline.com and Ambition IS. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 24th of December 2017. Coming to the first important article. This is the topic on the why, where, what page of Hindu. And the question here is that why are farmers distressed across India? Now, despite the fact that this is a very small article, it is one of the most important articles of the Hindu newspaper because in this small article itself, it has a number of points which have been raised upon farmer distress and the agrarian distress which the country is faced with. So it is a concise article, a good article, and a number of points can be extracted from this. So first and foremost, coming to the context of the article, the context is that the previous year, now since we are supposed to march into 2018, so this entire year of 2017 has witnessed a number of farmer protests. Also, there is something called a protest walk that has been held by 184 farmer groups in Delhi. So that is the context, that largely farmer groups have been protesting against the government, and there has been a general pulse of an agrarian and farmer distress in the country. Now, what are the issues? The first issue is that there is an instability of incomes. This is an important issue because here there are a number of reasons involved. Firstly, there are a lot of risks associated in the farm sectors. Also, there are no long-term policies of the government. All policies of the government are short-term, as a result of which the farmers are not experiencing a stability in their incomes. Then the author has also brought about a case of the National Commission of Farmers in 2006. It was headed by M.S. Swaminathan. The commission had brought about that how every year, there is a difference in growth rates. And because of this difference in the growth rates in the agricultural sector, there is an instability of income. The author has given some figures in this part of the article where he says that the growth rates have been abrupt. At some year, there has been an abrupt rise, and then another year, there has been a negative growth rate also. So in such a scenario, even if you do not remember the figures, you should know that there is an abruptness in the growth rates, which is both rising as well as falling. In such a scenario, though, income is not stable. So that is a primary issue in agrarian distress. Another thing is very important is that the rising population pressure on farming land. Now, India has a large number of 72% of Indian farmers are largely small and marginal farmers. So they have a land holding of less than 2 hectares. This you should remember, that the limit is of 2 hectares. Less than 2 hectares will be small and marginal farmers, and the average farm holding is that of 1.15 hectares. That is the figures that the author has given. These figures are important here. These you should remember. Some of the figures that I do recommend, these are amongst those. So definitely the farm size is very small, and this small farm size has many ramifications for the farmers. For example, they cannot use technology. The most advanced technology is designed for farm usage, and these farms are being small in size, cannot be very technologically advanced. Also, because of the small size, the large amount of agriculture in India is largely sustainable one. It is not a very not a very surplus kind of an agriculture, sorry, not a sustainable subsistence agriculture. So that is, it is majorly for the use of the farmer himself and not for the use of selling purposes, as a result of which obviously the farmer incomes are very low. Another thing that is important here is that the bargaining power of the farmer, because of low produce, is largely reduced. 72% of the farmers have such minuscule produce that they are unable to bargain for the rights. So that is one problem. Another aspect to this is that the laws in India, the inheritance laws in India are such that the property is supposed to be divided amongst the siblings, and this trend is going to continue in the backdrop of the demographic dividend. We have a large young population, so for further generations the land is going to be divided. This makes the land very much not available for bigger agricultural technologies. So that is one issue that is there in Indian agriculture. Then the third point is that of risks in production. A number of risks is what the farmers are facing. For example, the risks due to weather, the risks due to disasters like drought, flood, unseasonal rains, then price risks, international price risks, credit risks, market risks, government policy risks. Policies are not stable. Pests can attack the crops. The plants can suffer from diseases. Then they have risk of shortage of inputs like seeds and irrigation. So a plethora of risks is what the Indian farmer is facing. His security is something that the government should focus on, and eliminating these risks is the key to farmer welfare. So that is one point. Another thing is that of low remunerative prices. One reason for low remunerative prices is definitely small farm size, but another reason for low remunerative price is that of a weak marketing infrastructure. Now, the issue of APMC, this was there in all the previous economic service for the past 3 years have mentioned that how in the marketing in of agricultural producers largely biased in the favor of the middlemen, and the farmer is at suffering for this. Also, there's no infrastructure, no cold chains. So those are some issues that have been raised time and again. So that is one reason for farmer distress. Coming to the next point is that of prevalence of an informal credit. This is also one issue which is largely directly related to farmers' suicides also. But still, this can be linked to the instability in income also. That because of an instability in income, farmers are opting for credit, and largely the source of credit are informal credit like money lenders. This results in a vicious cycle where farmers get into debts and they often default on the credits. So that is another issue which is associated with the agricultural sector. Another issue is that of price fluctuations. Like even a few days back we discussed an article on pulses. There also I brought to the fore this point that how price of agricultural produce is not fixed. It is fluctuating depending upon a bumper crop, or in one year small lesser production in the crop. Also there is issue of hoarding by traders. So that's kind of policy of the government. A long-term policy is not there. Even in that article, the author had made out a point that just like industry, even farmers should be considered as an industry. Farming should be considered as an industrial pursuit, and in that direction, a stable long-term policy is the key, which is something that is lacking, and as a result of which farmers fall prey to price fluctuations. So that is another thing. Last point is that of cost of farm inputs. Now, according to many studies, the farm input costs have increased for the farmers, especially hybrid seeds, which need replacement. It has not become a very sustainable kind of a process. They require fertilizers, they require pesticides. This is all in the aftermath of the Green Revolution. So there you should link it that the cost of farm inputs has definitely increased for the farmer. However, his remuneration has not increased. The farm prices have not increased. Farm produce prices have not increased in harmony with that, and as a result of which farming has become an unprofitable occupation in this country. So that is another issue of agrarian distress. Then in the end, the author has given some suggestions where he says that there is a need to ensure stable flow of income as well as reduce risks by managing them. So all these issues, you need to reverse them into solutions here. So that is about this article, a very important one. Now coming to the next article, this is again a case study. Even in the previous Sunday newspaper, there was a case study on disaster management. Again, this Sunday it has been repeated. This time it is the case study of Kerala, especially, and Thiruvananthapuram, where a number of fishermen have lost their lives. There is an official death toll of 65. However, according to locals, the death toll is higher. So there are some issues that have come up. Now, if a particular question will not be directed towards this case in particular, but you can have an analysis on the disaster management, and these cases need to be used there as an example, and your suggestions should be based on these case studies. So the issues that are involved are first and foremost between the Indian Meteorological Department versus the State Disaster Management Authority. Now there is a conflict between those two institutions where both are accusing each other. Now, whenever these institutions are of at least the IMD is a national institute, so whenever such episodes happen, there are lapses, then credibility of these institutions is the first thing that is under question. And not only amongst citizens, even experts are questioning the credibility of IDMA. Firstly, that is the issue. Second issue is that whenever you are supposed to discuss disaster management and its flaws, you need to talk of a very important thing in disaster management is coordination. Not only coordination between the National Disaster Management Authority and the State Disaster Management Authority and District Disaster Management Authority, but also between these two institutions. So you can use this as an example that how there, because of a lapse of coordination between the IMD and SDMA, a large disaster was couldn't be avoided. And there, or else you can also use that how in the aftermath of disaster, institutions lay claims to objectifying the role of the other institutions. So in that case, in such scenario, what happens is that credibility of institutions is lost. So that is the first point. The second point is that of revamping of the State Disaster Management Authority. This is very important. See, the National Disaster Management Act of 2005 envisages an entire administrative system. But what has happened in this particular case is that the State Disaster Management Authority was weak. So, where on one hand we talk about decentralization, and at the other point we can see that how there are lapses at state level. So in this scenario, a balance has to be drawn between decentralization as well as centralization. Decentralization shouldn't be a blind decentralization because regulations were not maintained in the SDMA. So this is an article which has a critique on the State Disaster Management Authority. So even if you have an opportunity to analyze the Disaster Management Act, you need to stress upon the fact that specific protocols need to be laid down. Standard operating procedures need to be laid down for the State Disaster Management Authorities as well as the District Disaster Management Authorities in view of the critical role that they will play in case of a disaster. So that is important. The third point is that there is a need for satellite communication facilities. These are some suggestions that you should give if you have an opportunity to discuss, disaster management in India, because communication was the basic failure. Even the fishermen who were lost in the sea could not be found because of poor communication. See, today this is a world of technology. Every fisherman would probably have been having a mobile phone which should have been traced through satellite communication facilities. So these facilities need to be strengthened. This is one suggestion that the author has given. Another thing is that of an exemplary punishment for the guilty. Now, if there are loopholes, if there have been lapses in conduct of disaster management operations at any level, maybe at the national level or at the State Disaster Management Authority level, wherever, the guilty should be brought to the book. Only if the guilty are brought to the book will the people's faith in the government systems be reassured. Also, it will act as a deterrent for future cases. Otherwise, if the guilty are let gone off, so in such a scenario, the institutions lose their credibility. So that is one issue that has been brought about. Also, the author has brought about a good issue is that for need for better forecasting. This definitely should be a part of your disaster management related answers, because a major lapse has happened in the forecasting systems, where on one hand India lays claim to one of the strongest forecasting systems under the IMD. A lapse has happened in this case. So it does focus upon more research and development in this regard. Especially this is in the backdrop of a rising number of in extreme weather events because of the warming of the Arabian Sea. The western coast is highly vulnerable because of the warming of Arabian Sea. So in that scenario, better forecasting system, better research and development into the weather phenomena is of primary importance. Another thing is that of need for better dissemination system. The information that was to be disseminated amongst the fishermen was not up to the mark. Also, in one of the previous discussions, I had mentioned that how it was an ivory tower approach, that the pulse of this people was not known by the officials. Why? Because the fishermen were leaving for fishing 10 days before, and in some cases a month before. So the information that was disseminated was very much late as compared to the fishing cycles. So that was one important point which the author has again mentioned here. So for all these points, this article is important. Coming to the next article. Now, I have just kept this article because I feel that this is a very, very important example from ethics point of view. See, ethics paper is all about a moral dilemma. The idea here is that doctors have no business to be inhuman. Now, the profession of doctors in itself is considered to be a very humanitarian profession. It is a very compassionate profession. But there are cases time and again being reported in the media of how the doctors are being mistreated by patients because the patients are claiming that the doctors are not compassionate, they are behaving in a very robotic manner. So that way this is a very good example, because the IMA has given certain good points which are from ethical point of view. Firstly, they have said that there is a need for being both scientifically as well as morally correct. So the highest body of doctors themselves has laid importance to moral behavior. Also, it has mentioned that a compassionate attitude in practice is more important than science. That means morals and compassion take over science. Also, it has mentioned something called self-regulation policy for doctors. So this is important. Now, this is a good example. It not only in ethics paper, it will be a good example even in some cases of essays. Few years back, there was an essay on education and values. There's such kind of examples of utmost importance. So that is why I have included it to give you an idea. Now, Sunday's paper is full of case studies, and such examples will be many such examples will be there, even if they are not being discussed here. So you should read the Sunday newspaper as a paper for case studies, for good examples which you should extract. So with this, I finished today's discussion. I thank you all for watching this video. I hope you'll recommend it to your friends, and we shall be welcoming your feedback. So see you tomorrow. Thank you.